This was a heinous and cowardly act, and given what we now know about what took place, the FBI is investigating it as an act of terrorism. Anytime bombs are used to target innocent civilians, it is an act of terror.
That was President Obama calling the Boston bombings an act of terrorism. He was saying that earlier today. How do authorities determine what a terrorist attack is, and what are the implications of that assessment? Welcome to the News Hub. I'm Simon Constable. To discuss that matter further, we have the Wall Street Journal's, we have the University of Texas lawyer Robert Chesney. He joins us now from Austin, Texas. Professor Chesney, thanks for being there. You specialize in national security law, among many other things. Tell us, how do you go about defining whether it's an act of terror?
Well, Simon, the question of how to define terrorism is a famously difficult one, in that experts around the world have long disagreed about the precise dimensions. Even within American federal law, you get some variety between the State Department, Justice Department, and FBI definitions. But having said that, at bottom, it's sometimes not hard to say when something quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, and so forth, that it is a duck. In this case, what you're looking for are the same common elements that any watcher or listener or reader would think would matter. Illegal violence certainly directed at civilians, intended for some political purpose, whether that's to coerce the population, to coerce the government, for some political motivation as opposed to private criminal ends. And the only real wrinkle there, the place where people start to debate, is whether you could extend that definition to circumstances where, say, soldiers are targeted. There's some debate there, but that, of course, is not the fact pattern in Boston.
No, that is clearly not the fact pattern in Boston. Why was there a delay before the president came out and said this was an act of terror? I think a lot of us, the lay folk, would have said, yes, it was multiple bombs, and it was in civilian areas. Clearly, that's an act of terror.
Well, so there are a couple of possible things to say about that. One is, of course, that I never would begrudge senior government officials proceeding with a bit of caution in such a sensitive matter as this in their early comments, when the fog of uncertainty surrounding the events is still so clear. That said, of course, it was pretty obvious to everybody. You've got dual explosions at a major public event. It seems clear to everyone this is terrorism. Why hesitate? And in a couple of possibilities are, one, if you think about something like school shooting massacres, where the weapon's not an explosive, but a gun, and people tend, in not knowing the motivation, people tend not to immediately assume terrorism so much as horrific, violent crime of the non-terrorist kind. In theory, that could be what was going on here. Personally, I think the fact that there were two bombs suggests that, of course, it was politically motivated in some way or fashion, intended to sow fear and horror in the population. So at the end of the day, I don't think it's a close call. I think it's fairly clearly obvious. Even though we don't yet know who was responsible or what their motivations were, I think we can comfortably rule out non-terrorist crime.
Professor Chesney, what does that mean now that the Boston bombing has been classified as terrorism? Does that change the nature of the investigation and who's involved in it?
Not a great deal turns from an investigative viewpoint on whether, in a situation like this, one is willing to label it terrorism publicly or not. The fact of the matter is, in a circumstance of this kind, the FBI will be the lead investigative agency almost no matter what. Labeling it terrorism ensures this. It also ensures that the Joint Terrorism Task Force, or the so-called JTTF, will be the main coordinating body for that investigation. These JTTFs have been around as what you might think of as federal, state, and local interagency clearinghouses to manage investigations of exactly these types of offenses. They bring together all the top law enforcement and other specialists from outside the law enforcement communities to work together, so that you don't have to figure out how to coordinate only after the attack occurs.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Professor Chesney at the University of Texas, Austin. We thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you, Simon.